Hey guys. Well, let's begin. Tonight we wake up somewhere cold. Not crack a window cold. More like, did I just freeze my eyelashes to a reindeer hide kind of cold? You're lying on a mattress made of hay, under a fur that still smells faintly like goat. You blink awake in a smoky longhouse. A low fire sputters in the center, spitting shadows onto beams carved with stories older than your bloodline. Outside, the wind howls like it just lost a drinking contest. You sit up, head pounding. Last night's mead was strong, but that's not it. Something's different. Your fingers ache, your stomach growls, and your breath fogs the air like you're stuck inside a meat locker. A dog sniffs your foot, then curls back beside the hearth. You're wearing itchy wool, the kind of wool you wouldn't wear voluntarily unless your culture hadn't invented buttons yet. Then you realize it. You're not you anymore. You're Viking you. To be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before the lights go out, click like and subscribe, but only if you're brave enough to return tomorrow night. Post your location and local time in the comments. I want to know how far this bedtime story spreads. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, because silence makes this story worse, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise and stretch, your joints crack. You're in your late teens or maybe early 20s, old enough to have fought someone, not old enough to have truly feared death. You trudge toward the door, kick it open. A crisp slap of snow hits your face like nature's own wake-up call. Welcome to Viking Scandinavia, sometime around the 9th century. You don't know the date, because clocks haven't been invented and sundials don't work in a blizzard. People walk past in tunics and cloaks, hair braided, some with swords at their hips, others with chickens under their arms. No one looks happy. The cold does that to people. You join the crowd heading toward the market square. Today's a thing day. That's like court, parliament, and farmer's market all rolled into one. And gossip, always gossip. You're surrounded by folks who measure social standing by land, livestock, and who they've bedded. You're starting to notice that everyone glances at everyone else a little sideways, appraising. You're not just a person. Your potential. Marriage isn't about love. It's about strategy. And tonight, there's talk that you might be a pawn on someone's board. One historical fact. Vikings did not wear horned helmets. That's opera nonsense. But they did bathe once a week, which made them the sex symbols of medieval Europe. Cleanliness was hot. Frankish monks actually complained about Viking raiders stealing their women because the Norsemen were too well groomed. That's got a sting. Your childhood friend Thorstein sidles up and elbows you. He grins like he knows something. He probably does. You hear? Freydis's father's looking for someone to wed her. You feel your stomach drop. You've met Freydis. She once broke a boy's nose with a stick for trying to grab her braid. She's smart, fierce, and utterly terrifying. Also, her dowry includes 3 cows and a silver brooch, shaped like Odin's face. You chuckle nervously and deflect. She'd rather marry a goat. Thorstein raises an eyebrow. Goats don't bring her firewood. That's how this works. You don't swipe right. You chop wood, recite poetry, and show up with decent boots. Want to impress someone? Own a comb. And be good with your hands. Not like that. Carve a spoon. Fix a roof. Pluck lice without complaint. Now here's your quirky tidbit. Vikings believed in something called the mare, a sort of sleep demon that straddles your chest and steals your breath at night. Some scholars say it's where we get the word nightmare. Others just blame bad fish stew. Back to your breathy day. You watch a couple negotiate a marriage deal nearby. It's weirdly formal. 2 fathers shake hands. The bride stands stiffly, her face unreadable. There's mention of land boundaries and whether her weaving skills match her mother's. Romance? Not part of the conversation. Historians still argue whether young people had much say in who they married. Some sagas suggest runaway elopements and love matches. Others show brides as bartered goods. Reality probably depended on rank, gender, and whether your parents were jerks. You finally reach the fjord's edge. Boats bob gently on grey water. The mist kisses your skin. You think about your future, your place in the clan, your body, your worth. It's not just about who you want, it's about what you bring. Stomach growls again. You fish a dried fish out of your pouch. It tastes like regret. You chew anyway. A child runs past you screaming with joy, followed by a goat with what looks like a sock on its horn. Someone's pounding a drum near the shore, calling everyone back for the evening meal. It's goat stew again. You're not surprised. But that night, as you settle back under your fur blanket, you stare at the smoke curling up through the roof hole and feel it. This strange mix of hunger, fear, and anticipation. Something's coming. A change. A moment where your name, your body, your choices, however limited, will start to write your own saga. Outside, the aurora dances like it's daring you to step into its fire. Inside, your breath slows. The longhouse creaks. You don't know it yet, but tomorrow, someone's going to ask your father about your hand in marriage. And that's just the start of the trouble. You wake to shouting. It's early, too early, and someone's arguing outside the longhouse like they're auditioning for a saga. You grope for your tunic, stumble out barefoot, and the frost bites hard. Two men are circling each other, red-faced, steam curling from their mouths. Something about a stolen goat. But that's not really it. Everyone knows what this is about. A marriage proposal. Or rather, the marriage proposal yours. Apparently, Freydis's father decided to jump the axe and ask your father before you even knew what was happening. And now here you are, standing in your underpants, in front of half the village, while your dad scratches his beard like this is about firewood and not your entire life. You don't really get a vote, not officially, but your face is giving everything away. In Viking culture, marriage isn't private. It's public strategy. It's two families tying their fates together, their lands, their livestock, their enemies. Dowries flow both ways. The mundel is paid by the groom's family, and the himanfylgja, her dowry, comes with the bride. Sometimes there's even a morning gift. Yes, that's what it's called, given to the bride after the wedding night. No pressure. But here's the twists. Viking women could own property, initiate divorce, and write their own wedding terms, if they played it right. So, marriage wasn't total submission. It was more like a very tense negotiation where both parties had knives. Your dad calms the argument down with a grunt and a nod. The fathers agree to discuss things further at tonight's feast. That's Viking code for start drinking until everyone forgets what they were mad about. You drag your boots on and wander toward the woods. You need time to think. A raven watches you from a branch. Bad omen or divine message? Hard to say. The Norse believed ravens were Odin's spies, flying between worlds. Or they were just large, opportunistic birds. Again, historians can't decide. As you walk, your thoughts drift to Freydis. You remember the time she split a log with one swing, then laughed when you couldn't lift it. Or how she once caught a fish with her bare hands and dared you to kiss it. She's wild, fierce, and kind of terrifying. Still, you're not sure marriage is what either of you want. Suddenly, you hear a sharp cry. In the clearing ahead, Freydis is training with her spear, her braid snapping behind her like a whip. She spots you, and doesn't stop. Instead, she twinkles the weapon in a blur, then lets it drop into the snow like punctuation. So, she says, not quite smiling, you gonna fight me or marry me? You choke on your breath. Is there a third option? She rolls her eyes, but there's mischief in them. Maybe. You sit on a fallen log while she practices. Her arms are scarred, her fingers calloused. Not the image most people picture when they think Viking bride, but that's the point. The North weren't monolithic. Women could be housekeepers, traders, priestesses, or shield maidens. Not officially part of the army, maybe, but sagas are filled with women who wielded weapons and made kings bleed. Quirky fact of the day, some Viking wedding customs included bedding witnesses. Yes, people literally watched to make sure the marriage was sealed, usually older relatives, which is somehow worse. One Icelandic tale even describes the groom passing out from nerves before anyone could confirm anything happened. Solidarity, buddy. Frady flops beside you, breathing hard. I don't want to be a wife, she mutters. Not like my mother. He nods slowly. I don't want to be traded like a sword. She looks at you sideways. Then don't be. The wind whistles through the trees like it's weighing your words. Behind you the village bell clangs. Feast prep. But before you leave, she grabs your hand. Brief, rough, real. No one sees. Maybe that's how it has to be. At the feast, the hall is warm with meat smoke and pine sap. Torches flicker on walls painted with shields and serpent carvings. People drink, eat, shout over each other. You sit beside your father, barely tasting your food. Across the hall, Freydis sits stone-faced between her parents, picking apart a bone with surgical focus. The matchmaker, a wiry man who's lost more teeth than he has sheep, raises a horn and begins outlining the terms of a potential match. You tune him out. All you hear is your own heartbeat and the clink of Freydis's cup against wood. Somewhere between the boar roast and the boiled cabbage, a quiet deal is struck. Nothing official yet, but enough to lock eyes with her once across the room and see it in her face. This isn't over. Later, you sneak out into the night. The stars are viciously bright. The snow crunches under your feet like brittle secrets. You walk to the fjord again, breathing hard, brain buzzing. A soft voice calls from behind a tree. You coming or not? Freydis. You glance back at the longhouse. Then you follow her into the trees. What happens next? Not quite love. Not yet. But maybe. The start of something worth fighting for. You follow her deep into the woods, where the snow glows ghost brew under the moon, and your breath fogs like secrets you haven't spoken yet. Freydis walks ahead, cloak snapping behind her, like she owns the whole forest. Maybe she does. She doesn't talk for a while, and neither do you, which is weird, because your heart's slamming against your ribs like it's trying to stage a mutiny. Finally, she stops at a hollowed-out stump and sits, motioning for you to do the same. So, you're just going to marry me because two old men shook hands over some goats? She says, eyebrow raised. You shrug. It's 3 goats and a brooch. She snorts. Oh, well then. You both laugh. It cuts through the tension like a blade through ice. That's when you realize something. She's scared too. Not of you. Don't flatter yourself. But of what this marriage means. Of being trapped, labeled, watched. Especially in a world where even love comes with a ledger. You remember growing up near her. You were 5 when you saw her punch a boy twice her size for calling her a troll. She broke his nose. He married someone else. She's different now. Still fierce, but layered. Less fire, more ember. She smells like smoke and pine resin, and her hair's full of bark from ducking under branches. You notice these things now. You ask if she wants this, the marriage, the future, the you. She picks up a stick and pokes at the snow. I want to choose, even if it's a bad choice. In Viking culture, not all marriages were arranged, but most were expected, especially for landowning families. Love could come later, if you were lucky, but compatibility, that had to be measured like cattle weight. Social status, fertility, honor. Fun fact, one Norse custom involved measuring a potential spouse's wealth, not just by land or livestock, but by how many spoons they owned. Spoons. Apparently, eating soup without one was the medieval equivalent of being a broke loser. Freydis leans toward you. We could fake it. You blink. Fake what? The engagement. Tell them we're trying, that we're working up to the wedding, and then stall. Buy time. Maybe something better comes along. Or maybe not. But at least we're not livestock. You want to tell her you'd actually be okay with marrying her, that it wouldn't be the worst fate, that maybe, just maybe, you like the idea of waking up next to someone who could throw an axe better than you. But you nod instead. Okay, we stall. It's a strange deal, like a game, but it gives you both power in a place where people keep trying to take it away. You walk her back to the edge of the village. A shadow moves behind a tree. You freeze. But it's just Torstein, holding a torch and wearing the world's worst smirk. "Romantic walk?" he says. "No," you both say in unison. He snickers and disappears into the night, probably to go bother someone else, or flirt with the baker's apprentice, who's far too smart for him. The next few days pass in a blur of strange sideways glances and exaggerated politeness. Your parents are suspiciously cheerful. Hers are cautiously smug. Everyone acts like wedding bells are already ringing, even though Viking weddings didn't use bells. Too Catholic. You and Freydis continue the charade. You go on walks, sit next to each other at meals. She braids your hair once and nearly rips out half your scalp. You pretend it didn't hurt. She pretends it didn't amuse her. One afternoon she gives you a carved token, a tiny wooden horse with runes etched into the belly. "It's for luck," she says, or for throwing at people who annoy you. You give her a chunk of amber you found near the fjord. She holds it up to the light and says, "It looks like frozen honey." Then she pockets it without another word. Historians still argue whether Viking engagements were considered legally binding. Some say a formal proposal with witnesses was the contract. Others argue it wasn't official until the bedding night, sealed by a feast, a gift, and the communal announcement that the sheets are warm. That's not a metaphor. They actually used warm sheets. Then one day, something changes. You wake up to the sound of drums, not the usual dinner call rhythm, but something harder, urgent. You rush outside. A messenger stands in the village square, panting, cloak stiff with frost. He brings news. A neighboring clan is preparing for war, over a border dispute, or a theft, or an insult that turns into a duel and then into 2 dead men and a lot of angry brothers. Everyone's tense. Spears are sharpened, horses are readied, and suddenly, your pretend engagement has real consequences. Marriage might seal an alliance, or make your village a target. If you marry Freydis now, her family becomes bound to yours. You become political. That night your father sits you down. "You don't have to love her," he says, "but you have to stand by her, if this goes through." You nod, slowly, because you're not just a boy anymore, you're a chess piece, and the board is shifting. You find Freydis by the shore again. She's hurling stones at the water, each one skipping once, then vanishing. She doesn't look at you when she says, "So, you ready to make this lie real?" And you say nothing, because it doesn't feel like a lie anymore. You say yes. Not because you're sure, and definitely not because you're brave. You say yes because your heart's been pounding like a war drum for a week, and you can't tell anymore whether it's fear or something worse, hope. And because when Freydis looks at you now, it's different. Less suspicion, more calculation. You're not just pretending, neither is she. The next morning the longhouse smells like boiled roots, bear grease, and anticipation. Your father's sharpening a blade that hasn't been used since his wedding day. Your mother's already humming war songs while polishing her best brooch. North fashion tip: if your jewelry can't double as a weapon, you're underdressed. The village prepares. Word's gone out, there will be a handfasting. That's Viking for "we're tying the knot," but literally. Hands bound with cloth, oaths spoken. A public declaration that you two are now yoked tighter than a pair of oxen ploughing the same cursed field. You and Freydis don't speak much that day. Too many eyes, too much pressure. But when you pass her in the market, she bumps your shoulder just slightly. It's more contact than you've had in a week. You feel it in your stomach. Handfasting ceremonies in Viking culture weren't always elaborate. Some were private agreements, others were feasts with dozens of witnesses. They often took place on neutral ground, sometimes even on burial mounds, because what better way to start a new life than standing on top of old bones? There are gifts exchanged. Your family offers Freydis a pair of fine shoes, which in Viking terms is romantic as heck. Hers gives you a cloak lined with rabbit fur. You try not to read too much into the fact that it's dyed blood red. The local Gothi, a pagan priest and part-time blacksmith, presides over the ceremony. He mumbles blessings to Freya and Thor, gods of love and lightning, which feels appropriate given the spark in the air. May you share warmth and food and bed and burdens, he says. You glance at Freydis. She looks as if she'd rather fight a troll. May your quarrels be short, your winters warm, and your offspring strong enough to carry swords before they can walk. She smirks. You raise an eyebrow. She mouths, "Dream on." It's not love, but it's something. Your hands are tied with embroidered wool. You both repeat the words, hesitantly at first. By the end, your voice almost sounds steady. The cloth is cut, the oath sealed. You're married now, or close enough for the village to start treating you like you've already consummated under the stars and had 3 kids. Here's your quirky fringe tidbit. Some sagas suggest that a man had to literally carry his bride over the threshold to prove he was strong enough to own her. But in some areas, the woman led the man inside, symbolizing her control over the household. You can guess which version Freydis prefers. For that night, the bedding doesn't happen. Not publicly anyway. Too much tension, not enough privacy. You both duck into a small guest hut instead, one gifted by a distant uncle who's conveniently absent and probably drunk in the woods. The room is dark, cold, smells like pine needles and dust. She sits cross-legged by the hearth and stares at the wall. You sit beside her, careful not to touch. Finally, she says, "If you snore, I will smother you with a pillow." You nod. That's fair. You lay down side by side, fully clothed, boots still on. You're close enough to hear her breathing. For a long time, neither of you speak. You just lie there, listening to wind scratch at the shutters and wondering how many other people out there are faking it too. Or maybe not faking, just waiting for something real. Historians still argue whether Viking handfastings were considered full legal marriages or more like engagements. Some lasted a year, like a trial period. Test the bedding, test the chores, test whether your new spouse is terrible at milking goats. If it didn't work out, cut the cloth, cancel the feast and move on. Some even say you could switch partners like tunics. Others disagree entirely, saying Norse marriage laws were way stricter than we imagine. The truth is probably somewhere in between. A week passes. You and Freydis fall into a rhythm. You gather firewood. She fishes. You take turns pretending not to notice the way your hands brush when passing tools. She teaches you how to use a short blade. You teach her how to skip stones better. Both fail at making bread, though hers at least doesn't catch fire. One night, you're both eating by the fire, quiet and warm. She says, out of nowhere, "My mother said love was a luxury, said most women just settled for someone who didn't smell too bad." You glance at her. "And you think I qualify?" She shrugs. It's early. There's a softness in her voice you haven't heard before. You offer her a bit of smoked eel. She accepts. Progress. Another night, while walking back from the woods, she slips on ice. You catch her by the arm. She stumbles into you, laughs, then shoves you hard enough to nearly knock you over. "Don't get ideas," she warns. Too late. Soon, the village begins referring to you as husband and wife. It's weird, it feels big, and it feels not terrible. You're no longer just that boy with the good boots. You're hers, and maybe she's yours. You're not in love, not yet, but you're learning the weight of commitment, one firewood bundle, one awkward silence at a time. And just when you think you've figured out the rhythm, someone new rides into the village, with a beard like a thundercloud and eyes like ice. And he's asking about Freydis. He's a shadow on horseback, barely tethered to this earth. His horse snorts, stamping frost into slush, and he swings down with a kind of deliberate grace that makes everyone stop what they're doing. His name is Eirik. No one says his last name, because he doesn't need one. You know the type. Sword on his back, scars on his face, and a voice like old leather. He's not here to trade or visit family. He's here for her. Freydis. You watch from the edge of the square, blood cooling fast. He asks around, casually, too casually, where she is. When someone points him toward the riverbank, he thanks them like he already owns the land beneath their feet. You follow. You find them standing by the water. Freydis has her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. He's talking low, leaning in, his grin too easy for someone visiting a newly married woman. You can't hear everything, but you catch enough. Should have waited. Still time. Things don't have to end like this. She catches sight of you. Her face hardens. He turns, looks you over, doesn't say anything, just smirks. Like you're a child in the wrong hall, holding a sword you don't know how to use. Later, she tells you the short version. We were promised once, years ago. It fell apart. He didn't take it well. That's it. No further detail. You don't push. Because this world doesn't allow soft things like exes. In this world, broken engagements often lead to broken skulls. Eirik stays, of course he does, claims he's just visiting, but somehow always ends up in the same rooms as Freydis. He drinks loudly, laughs harder, tells stories about raiding south and bedding noble women, always while looking right at you. The longhouse starts to feel smaller. Viking love triangles were rarely quiet. In fact, one of the Icelandic sagas describes a man carving runes into a whalebone as a love spell, only for it to backfire and poison the woman he wanted. She died. He fled. Romance. You and Freydis barely speak now, not because you're fighting, but because you're not. You tiptoe around each other, each pretending everything's fine, and everything's not fine. One morning, you find Eirik training with some of the younger men. He's shirtless, because of course he is. He handles his sword like he's showing off for the gods. The boys adore him. You hate him. You also kind of want to be him, which is worse. Later that day, he corners you behind the blacksmith shed. She's not meant for village life, he says, stepping too close. She's fire. You'll snuff her out. You stare at him. We're married. He smiles. For now. Historians still argue whether Viking women could break off engagements without permission. Some evidence suggests yes, especially if the man turned out to be weak, dishonorable, or boring. Others think there were conditions, familial pressure, dowry consequences. Freydi? She doesn't strike you as someone who waits for permission. That night, you finally talk. Not like before. This is knives on the table talk. You find her by the well, staring into black water like it's going to answer her questions. He's not what I want, she says before you can speak. You breathed out, not sure you were even breathing in. But part of me wonders if I'm what he wants, or just something he lost. You nod. That makes too much sense. You know the type. Men who want what they can't have. Not because of love, but because of pride. She leans back against the stone rim of the well, looking up. You're steady, she says. Safe. Oof, safe. That word cuts more than you I can be fire too, you say. She smiles, but it's the kind of smile people give before they walk into storms. A quirky detail for you. Viking women were known to carve protective runes into their husbands' weapons before battle. Part magic, part love letter, part please don't die. Some swords were literally said to sing when swung thanks to these carvings. Whether the singing was metaphor or mead-fueled hallucination, still debated. The next day, Eirik challenges you to a spar, not officially, just for fun. It is not fun. You're no stranger to a blade, but he's faster, meaner. He fights like he's flirting with Freydis. Every move is theatre. He knocks your sword aside, grins, and throws you down hard enough to bruise your rib. You lie in the snow, winded, while the crowd oohs and Freydis looks away. Eirik offers you a hand. You don't take it. That night you sit alone by the fjord. You hold the wooden horse she gave you. You remember her braid brushing your cheek, the warmth of her beside you on the first night, her laughter when you burned the bread. You don't want to lose this. Not to him, not to anyone. You think about what it means to fight for something, not with fists, with honesty. Till solemnly. So the next morning you do something reckless. You walk straight into her longhouse, past her father, past the stairs. She's in the back, braiding her hair. She looks up, startled. I don't want to be safe, you say. I want to be yours. She blinks. That's dramatic. You step closer. I'm serious. She frowns. And if I say I still need time? You nod. Then I'll wait, but not forever. Silence. Then she says, you have 10 days. If he's still here after that, I'll send him away myself. And that's the first time you believe she might actually choose you. 10 days. That's what she gave you. It sounds like plenty, until you realize what it really is. A countdown, a test, a fuse, burning down slow. And every hour that Eric's boots crunch snow outside your door, it gets harder to breathe. You try not to obsess, but every time you step outside, there he is, sparring with the younger men, flirting with the older women, helping chop wood like he's a gift from Thor, wrapped in smugness. It's wild Frades barely speaks. Not cold, just unreadable, like a stone with a secret beneath it. And you start to feel like background noise in your own life. You throw yourself into chores, sharpen tools, split firewood, even repair a neighbor's fishing net just to have something to do with your hands. But it's not working. So you do the unthinkable. You talk to Grandma. She's ancient, possibly immortal. Her house smells like onions, wet wool, and secrets. You find her grinding herbs in a bowl that might be older than the village itself. You ask her what it takes to keep someone, really keep them. She doesn't look up. Keep? You keep cows. You keep swords. You honor a woman. You shift. But what if someone's trying to take her? She snorts. Then don't whine. Be worth the fight. You leave with a pouch of something that smells like garlic and grave dirt. For courage, she says, or indigestion, I forget. Here's your historical fact. Viking society had no shame about seeking advice from elders, especially matriarchs. Women ran households, settled disputes, even interpreted dreams. If Grandma said, don't marry that boy, you didn't marry that boy, unless you wanted her to curse your goats. On the 5th day, you catch Frades watching you, not just in passing, watching. You're hauling logs, sweaty, annoyed, probably covered in sawdust. She stands by the well, tilts her head. Later, she finds you. You're bleeding, she says, nodding at your palm. You glance down. You hadn't noticed. She takes your hand, wraps it in linen, and ties it with the precision of someone who's done this before. She doesn't speak while doing it, just pulls it tight. You whisper, "You looking for reasons to stay?" She doesn't answer, but she doesn't walk away either. A quirky tidbit. The Norse believed a shared injury created a bond. Some warriors deliberately drew blood with a loved one and pressed wounds together, like sealing a pact. Romantic or gross, depends how clean your blade is. On day 7, Eric tries a new tactic. He corners you at the forge. "You're not bad," he says. "You just don't fit her." You glare, and you do. "I did," he says, before she started playing house with someone who can't keep up. You want to hit him. You want to be above it. You manage neither. Instead you say, "She'll choose." Eric smiles. She already has. But has she? You start writing her a poem. Yeah, a poem. You're not sure what's worth, getting stabbed by Eric or admitting to rhyming ice with twice, but you keep at it, carving the verses into a piece of driftwood. The words aren't perfect, but they're yours. On day 9, there's a feast. No occasion, just midwinter boredom and too much fish. The longhouse fills with heat and noise. Eric sits near the hearth. You sit at the other end, Freydis walks in late. All eyes turn. Her braids woven tighter than usual, her boots clean, her face unreadable. She sits between you. You barely speak, but your shoulders touch. Then the bard begins to sing. It's a tale of a hero who lost his lover to a rival, who fought, lost again, then found her years later and won her heart. Not with a sword, but with a story. People scoffs, not realistic. Someone mutters. Freydis whispers, depends on the story. You breathe in the smoke, the tension, her closeness. The next morning is day 10. You wake before dawn, wash in the river, dress carefully. You wear the red cloak her family gave you, even though it itches like sin. You tie the wooden horse token to your belt. You carry the driftwood poem in your hand like a weapon. And you wait. She comes to you near the fjord. No armor, no spear, just that look, the one that used to scare you, and now just makes your lungs forget their job. I made my choice, she says. Your heart freezes. Told Eric to leave. You let out a breath. He go quietly? No, she smirks. He went bloody. Your eyes widen. Wait. Did you? She waves a hand. Just his pride, and a little bit of his face. You laughs, then she laughs, and you realize it's the first time you've both laughed together in days. She looks down. I don't know what this is, us, but it's real. You hand her the carved driftwood. She waits it. She doesn't cry, of course not. She's Freydis. But she tucks it into her belt and says, it's awful, but it's mine. And for the first time, you really believe this might work. Not because you won, but because she chose. The snow melts early that year, and with it, the tension that's been building in your chest for weeks. Eric is gone. He left without saying a word to you, though someone found a blood-stained tunic near the woods and a horseshoe jammed into a tree like a warning. Freydis doesn't speak of it again. Neither do you. Instead, the two of you begin living like, well, something close to a couple. Not quite lovers, not quite strangers. Somewhere between battle buddies and bedtime spoon partners who sometimes argue over who gets more of the fur blanket. It's good. Not perfect, not poetic, but real. Then one night, Thorstein bursts into the longhouse, face flushed and eyes wide like he's seen Thor himself juggling lightning bolts. Guys, he pants, have you heard about the brothel ship? You blink. Freydis lowers her cup. The what? Thorstein's grin could power an entire village. Floating brothel. They say one of the longships anchored near Hedeby is full of women who entertain traders and warriors on water. You stare at him like a floating mead hall. With bedrolls, he nods. And options. Freydis says dryly, maybe they just really like sailing. He waves her off. I'm telling you, it's real. A trader said he paid 2 silver for an evening and got complimentary dried apples. You shoot Freydis a look. Dried apples? She shrugs. Tempting. Now here's where it gets interesting. Historians still argue about this theory, whether Viking longships were ever used as mobile brothels. Some scholars dismiss it as slander from prudish Christian chroniclers. Others point to shipwrecks with strange cargo, combs, perfume flasks, embroidered pillows, and wonder. What's certain is that Vikings did have a complex relationship with sex and trade. In big ports like Hedeby or Birka, women worked as entertainers, weavers, healers, and yes, sometimes sex workers. But those roles weren't always shameful. In fact, some women earned enough silver to buy property, more than some warriors ever managed. Still, you and Freydis don't give the brothel boat much thought, not really, until it docks near your village. It arrives quietly, under moonlight. A sleek longship, carved with serpents, sails furled. No war banners, just soft drums and the flicker of lanterns hung along the prow. People gather at the shore like it's a festival, curious, cautious. You go, so does Fridays, because of course she does. The ship isn't exactly a brothel. It's more like a traveling pleasure hall. Women in embroidered tunics greet visitors with honeyed wine. There's music, laughter, games. You're handed a fig-stuffed cake before you even set foot on the gangplank. Freydis squints. This smells like a trap. You nod. A very nice, smelling trap. One of the women, tall, gold-trimmed, probably half vulva, spots you too and smiles. Looking for something specific? Freydis crosses her arms. Not for sale. The woman grins wider. Neither are we. We trade. Turns out the ship doesn't just offer carnal delights. It trades in secrets, gossip, letters, silk thread and saffron and stories. Some of the women are trained healers. Others memorize local songs and recite them for coins. A few, definitely there for companionship of the sweaty kind. But not everyone. You're ushered below deck by a redhead who smells like cloves. The inner hold is lined with rugs and soft furs. It feels strangely sacred, not seedy, like someone put effort into making pleasure something respectful. Freydis whispers, "This is not what I expected." You nod. Me neither. Here's your quirky fringe detail. Some Norse poems refer to sea maidens who seduced warriors not just with beauty, but comfort. They offered food, warm beds, and emotional refuge. Historians still debate whether these were real roles, poetic metaphors, or the medieval version of romanticized propaganda. You and Freydis don't stay long, but you leave with a jar of imported honey, a story about a failed seduction involving a goat, and a feeling neither of you can quite name. That night, lying beside her under your fur blanket, you ask, "Do you ever think we make love too serious?" She thinks for a while. Then, maybe. Or maybe we forget that it can be ours. You glance at her. You mean not something traded or stolen? She nods. Just something chosen. You reach out. She doesn't pull away. And in that moment, the weight of performance falls off your shoulders. You're not actors, or pawns, or bargaining chips in a political game. You're two tired people under shared fur, just trying to figure it out. In the weeks that follow, the ship becomes the village's favorite scandal. Some elders grumble, others sneak aboard. The Gothi refuses to comment. One man even tries to propose to one of the women. She laughs so hard she nearly falls into the fjord. Eventually, the ship moves on, but it leaves behind questions, conversations. A subtle shift in how your village thinks about desire, not as sin, not as scandal, but as choice. And for you and Freydis, it opens something. One night, while walking by the water, she says, "I don't want to just survive this life." You say, "Neither do I." She stops, takes your hand. "So let's write our own saga." No audience, no scripts, just you and her and a soft wind on the fjord. You start waking up before sunrise, not because you have to, but because you want to. The air's still cold enough to sting your teeth and your boots freeze solid if you leave them outside overnight. But that's just part of the charm now. You've grown into this life, into her, and strangely enough, into yourself. Freydis sleeps in longer. She always does. Not out of laziness, but because she claims the world makes more sense when it's quiet and dark. Sometimes you return from gathering firewood to find her still wrapped in furs, hair undone, one leg half hanging off the bed like a warning to anyone who might disturb her peace. Winter's trying to let go. There are hints, melting drips from the roof, birds testing the idea of songs again, children daring to remove one layer of clothing. Still, cold rules everything. And with it comes that particular Viking problem. How do you stay romantic when your toes are frozen solid and your nose hasn't stopped dripping since Yule? You do your best. You carve a charm from whalebone, a little fox, because she once told you she liked their sly eyes. You present it to her over breakfast. She eyes it suspiciously, like it might explode. then ties it to her braid without a word. That's basically love poetry, in Viking terms. Some nights she reads to you old verses passed down from her mother. Some of them are riddle songs. Others are, to be honest, barely disguised smut. She recites one involving Loki, 3 onions, and a very confused shepherd. You cough into your mead while she tries not to laugh. Here's your historical fact. Norse poetry wasn't just for battle boasts or epics. It was often deeply personal, intimate, even flirtatious. Skalds composed man-songs, love songs often scandalous enough to get them banished if aimed at the wrong person. More than once, someone got stabbed over a clever verse. You write her one. It's bad, like wince, and hope she's drunk. You compare her eyes to frozen peat bogs and her laugh to a dying raven. She stares at you afterward, like she's trying to decide whether to kiss you or commit homicide. But then she mutters, "At least you tried," and puts the verse under her pillow. You survive February with a mix of teasing, wrestling, and inventing new ways to keep warm that aren't technically sinful, but would definitely make your grandmother faint. You also discover that Viking couples, married or not, often shared tasks as a form of intimacy. Chopping wood together wasn't just practical, it was flirtation. Mending fishing nets was basically therapy. There was even a belief that baking flatbread as a pair guaranteed fidelity. You attempt it once. The results could be used to shingle a roof. Brady's tries to teach you embroidery. You stab your thumb, twice. She shakes her head and says, "Stick to poetry, or swords." You watch her stitch a design into your tunic, a knot of thorns wrapping around a crescent moon. You don't ask what it means. She wouldn't tell you anyway. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking lovers used secret symbols in their clothing to signal availability or interest. A stitched rune at the hem, a bead tied to a belt, a hidden pattern woven into a collar. The North weren't subtle, but they were clever. One day, you find a message etched into the frost on your water pail. "Meet me where the ice breaks." It's her. You trudge to the river bend, boots crunching over snow. She's waiting, wrapped in sealskin, hair braided into something fierce. "I want to swim," she says. You blink. It's still winter. She shrugs. Barely. Before you can argue, she's pulling off her cloak, then her boots, then... You stop her. "You'll die." She laughs. "Not if you jump in with me." You stare at the water. It's black, glassy, with small cracks spiderwebbing near the edge. Madness. Absolute madness. And yet, you strip down to your linen. She wades in first, gasping, teeth clenched. You follow. It's like being stabbed by the sky. Cold eats your skin. You shout. For 60 seconds, you are not a husband, or a farmer, or a warrior in training. You're just a heartbeat in a river with someone who terrifies you in all the right ways. When you crawl out, shivering, she kisses you. Fast, fierce, not a question. Just fact. You huddle together under your cloaks, breath steaming, hearts racing. The river murmurs behind you like it knows a secret. That night, in your bed under every fur you own, you press against her shoulder and whisper, "Why me?" She's quiet for a long time. Then she says, "You didn't try to tame me." You sleep better that night than you have in months. Historians still argue whether Norse couples felt romantic love the way we do now. Some claim Viking marriage was purely practical. Others point to the sagas full of longing, heartbreak, and epic devotion. Truth is, love existed. It just wasn't always gentle. Neither are you two, but there's something in the quiet moments, in shared frostbite and mangled poems, that tells you this isn't just survival anymore. It's becoming something real. The first green shoots crack through the frost like defiance. Spring doesn't arrive. It fights its way into the village. Snow still clings to rooftops, but the mud is soft and you can smell the earth again. Life is coming back, which, in Viking terms, means it's time to hunt, rebuild, plant, and start thinking about children. Yes, children. It starts with your neighbor Astrid, who announces her pregnancy in the most Viking way possible, by drinking an entire horn of milk in one gulp and shouting, "It worked." Her husband beams. You and Freydis glance at each other, like you just walked into someone else's dream. You're not even sure you've had the talk. Not the awkward modern version with diagrams and bananas, but the real old-school Viking version. If you bed her during the moon of the lamb, she'll give you a child by frost. Freydis is unbothered, as always. People keep asking me when we'll have little warriors running around, she says, slicing bark for tinder. I tell them the world's not ready. You smile. And are you? She shrugs. I'd rather raise wolves. She's joking, maybe, hopefully. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Viking children were considered the future of the clan, but they weren't babied like modern kids. Once you could walk, you could fetch water. Once you could hold a blade, you practiced with one. Childhood was short. Adulthood was early. And names were recycled like family armor. If a child died, their name might be given to the next baby, as if daring fate to try again. And pregnancy? It was dangerous. Viking women had knowledge of herbs, midwifery and magic, but complications were common. Burial sites show women buried with tools used during childbirth, often alongside infants, a reminder that motherhood was as close to battle as any raid. But before babies, there's another kind of intimacy blooming, one that sneaks up on you like spring fog. You start noticing her in quieter ways, how she hums while skinning fish, how she always steals the warmer side of the blanket, how she sharpens her blades with the same focus you use when mending your boots. And then, one day, she touches your face. Not by accident, not to tease, just lightly, like she's checking if you're still real. You say nothing, because anything you say would ruin it. Later that night, she asks if you remember the first time you saw her. Yeah, you say. You were throwing a dead eel at Thorstein. She smiles. He deserved it. You hesitate, then say, I didn't know then, but I think I started hoping. That gets her. She looks down, then she murmurs, You're too soft. Only for you. A long pause. Then, good. She curls up beside you. You don't try to make anything happen. You don't need to. The warmth is enough. Here's your quirky fringe tidbit. The Norse believed in cider, a kind of magic often practiced by women to influence fate, love and fertility. Some rituals involved tying knots in cloth while chanting names. Others used carved bones placed beneath pillows. Their accounts, very whispered, of lovers seeking vulvas for performance remedies, involving everything from elk marrow to dried fish bladders. You and Freydis don't need magic. But one morning she leaves a knotwork charm on your pillow, woven with red thread. It's shaped like a snake eating its own tail. You ask her what it means. She shrugs, endless. You don't ask again. Still, the baby talk spreads like a rash. Old women drop hints about cradlewood. Young boys ask if you'll let your firstborn learn axe or bow. Someone gives you a rattle carved from deer antler and says, just in case. You try not to panic, because the truth is, you don't know what kind of father you'd be, or if you even can be. In this time, fertility isn't something you test with little plastic wands. It's more mysterious, and terrifying, and unpredictable. Historians still argue whether Vikings saw childlessness as a curse or just bad luck. Some evidence points to social pressure, especially for women. Others say there is acceptance, even respect, for couples without children, especially if they contributed in other ways. You're not sure what you believe yet. One night, Freydis says, if we ever had one, I'd teach her to ride before she could walk. You grin. Her? She nods. Boys break too easy. You laugh. She does too. Then she goes quiet. I'd want her to grow up free, she says. Not like this. Not traded. Not owned. You reach for her hand. Then we'd make it so. That night, there's a shift. A closeness that isn't about bodies or bargains. Just skin, breath, and the slow, terrifying bloom of love in a world where nothing lasts forever. Not even spring. The sun finally starts climbing higher in the sky. The wind still bites, but it doesn't gnaw to the bone. You can walk outside without wrapping your face, and the fjord no longer crackles with ice. It ripples. Everything feels looser, like the world has unclenched its fists. And with that ease comes temptation. It starts small. You notice her smile lasts a few seconds longer. She rests her head on your shoulder when she's tired, not just when she's cold. You brush her hair back once, and she doesn't flinch. You think you've made it, crossed some invisible threshold between survival and affection. Then, one afternoon, you come back from the woods and find her alone at the hearth, staring at the coals like they owe her an explanation. Her jaws clenched. Her braids undone. You know that look. You've seen her give it to deer, drunks, and once a thunderstorm that tried to ruin her roof. What happened? You ask. She doesn't speak for a long time. Then she says, "Someone saw you speaking to Brynhild." You frown. Brynhild? She was asking about... Wait, what? "Sure, someone you complimented her dress," Freydis mutters. He blinked. She was holding an axe. I was complimenting the axe. Freydis doesn't laugh. But the tension curls around the room like smoke. You're not even sure you're angry, just offended by the stupidity of it all. That's when you realize this is about more than Brynhild. It's about trust, about territory, about how close your connection is to slipping. In Viking culture, adultery wasn't just frowned upon, it could be fatal. Especially if you were caught in the act. Husbands had the right to kill their wife's lover on the spot. Wives, on the other hand, had fewer options, unless they were wealthy, powerful, or wielding something sharp. And the laws, they weren't consistent. Historians still argue whether cheating meant physical betrayal, emotional intimacy, or simply being seen together too often. Some regions punished the unfaithful with fines, others used public shame, and in rare cases, lovers were buried alive. Together. A bit excessive, but the message was clear. Play stupid games, win brutal consequences. You sit beside her. He asks about fish traps. You say quietly, "I said she had good aim." That was it. Freydis stares into the fire. You nudge her gently. "You think I'm stupid enough to risk this for a compliment?" Her silence is louder than a scream. Then she says, "People always want what isn't theirs, and sometimes we forget what we already have." You realize then, she's not just jealous. She's scared of losing you, of being betrayed, of opening up only to get burned. So you say something bold, risky. "I've never wanted anyone but you." She turns, eyes hard. "Not even a little curious?" You don't blink. Curiosity isn't worth wrecking what we've built. She exhales slowly, like she's trying to let the doubt out with her breath. Then she asks, "And if I got curious?" You smile. "Then, I'd hope you're as bad at lying as I am." And finally, she cracks a smile. You lean your heads together, not a kiss, just contact. The kind that says, "We're here, and we're not breaking. Not today." Quirky fact of the night? There's a tale of a woman named Holgerdur from the Njal saga, known for her beauty, cunning, and multiple husbands. When one slapped her for stealing bread, she had him killed. Later, when her last husband refused to give her a strand of his hair to make a bowstring in battle, he died. She shrugged. Love was conditional. Survival wasn't. Freydis would have liked her. Later that night, the tension lingers like smoke. You both lie under the firs, quiet, not touching. Then, out of the dark, she says, "I hate being vulnerable." You answer without thinking, "Me too." And then her hand finds yours. Not by accident, not for warmth, just because. She shifts closer, her voice a whisper. Do you ever wonder what this would be like if we weren't born into strategy and swords? You nod. All the time. You imagine another life. One where you meet her at a bakery or a dance. One where love isn't a battlefield. One where you can kiss her in the daylight and not wonder who's watching. But that's not your world, not now. So instead you kiss her shoulder just once, and she presses back against you, not passion, not performance, just comfort, shared heartbeat, synchronized breath. The next day word gets out that a neighboring village is investigating an adultery scandal. A woman accused of sneaking out during the full moon. They say the husband's demanding a duel. Everyone gossips like wolves, but not you and Freydis. You're too busy rebuilding your fence. Together. It creaks, stubborn and bent, but it holds. So do you. The shield maiden arrives at dawn. You're repairing a roof beam with a hammer that's seen too many winters, when a whistle slices the morning air. Heads turn, dogs bark, and down the hill she comes, on horseback, blonde hair braided like a battle standard, sword at her hip, and not a speck of apology on her. Her name is Ragnar. No one calls her anything else. She rides like she's bored of the road, of the horse, of everything except what's next. She's followed by two younger warriors carrying her gear and trying not to look terrified. Freydis is sharpening a spear by the well when Ragnar dismounts. They lock eyes. Neither smiles. You know this feeling. It's not tension, it's recognition. Later, at the mead hall, you hear the story. Ragnar's not here for trade or shelter. She's here because she was challenged. Someone in a nearby village insulted her honor, questioned her title as shield maiden. The trial will be public. The fight to first blood. She picked your village because of its neutrality. No bias, just blades. You glance at Freydis. She's unusually quiet. That evening, you find her sanding the hilt of her axe with more intensity than necessary. You know her, or you say. She doesn't answer. Where's your friend? She says. She was my standard. And suddenly, it makes sense. Ragnar wasn't just a traveling warrior, she was the warrior. The one Freydis looked up to. Maybe once followed, maybe once loved. You don't ask. You don't need to. In Viking culture, the idea of the shield maiden straddled the line between fact and legend. Women who fought. Real or myth? Archaeological finds say real. Burial sites with female skeletons and weapons. Yet sagas blur the line. Were they warriors or symbols? Did they lead in war or only in words? Historians still argue, but in Freydis's clenched jaw, you see the truth. Ragnar was real enough. The next day, Ragnar trains in the center field. She doesn't ask permission. She just moves, with a blade like a swan with teeth, fluid, deadly. The kind of precision that can't be faked. Men gather to watch, so do some women. You catch a few whispering. That night, in bed, Freydis asks, "Do you think I made the wrong choice?" The question knocks the air from you. You mean, not becoming like her? She nods into the dark. Or not staying with her? Do you stay quiet, because you don't want to say the wrong thing, because maybe the right thing isn't about you? Then you say, what she has, she earned. But so did you. Freydis turns toward you. What do I have? You don't list the firewood or the small house or the dented cup you both now claim as your favorite. You say, you have me, and I have you. If that's not enough, we change it. She doesn't answer, but she pulls your hand toward her chest, where her heart pounds like war drums. Quirky tidbit time. One rare Norse love charm involved burying your lover's comb under a hazel tree while whispering their name backwards. It was supposed to bind their heart to yours. Other methods included tying a lover's hair into your shield straps for courage in battle. Vikings didn't do casual affection. They committed like it was life or death. The duel is set for the third morning after Ragnar arrives. The whole village gathers. Ragnar wears a red tunic and a half smile. Her opponent is tall, broad, and looks like he hasn't bathed since Yule. He holds a short sword and a too long grudge. They fight in the thawing field, where old snow meets new grass. It's not a long fight. Ragnar feints left, then slices him across the thigh. Blood blooms. He drops. She doesn't gloat. The crowd roars. Justice is satisfied. But your eyes are on Freydis. She's staring at the field like she's remembering something buried. That night she doesn't come home right away. You wait. Try not to imagine what she's doing. Whether she's talking to Ragnar. Whether she's asking what could have been. When she finally walks through the door, her face is pale. She kissed me, she says. You stop breathing. Then she adds, and I let her. Silence. Then she sits across from you, looks you dead in the eye. I needed to know, she says, if the fire was still there, if I was still that person. You brace for the next part, the leaving, the goodbye. Instead, she says, it wasn't. You blink. What? She's still lightning, Freydis says softly. But I'm not the storm anymore. You don't speak. You just get up, walk over and sit beside her. She leans against you. Wise, you ask? None, she says. Still want this? I've never wanted anything more. And just like that, the shadow of Ragnar passes. Freydis isn't trying to be her anymore. She's trying to be yours. Steam curls up from the springs like breath from the earth itself. Sulphur sweet, ancient, and slightly suspicious. You didn't come here for luxury. No one really does. Viking bathhouses are less spa day and more sweat yourself half to death in a shed with strangers. But here you are, and Freydis is with you. It's bath night. Not the romantic kind, the communal kind. The bathhouse squats near the edge of the village, a low timber building with mossy stones and smoke trickling from every seam. Inside, the heat hits you like a wet slap. Steam coils around the benches, dripping from the ceiling, curling off bare shoulders and flushed faces. You undress behind a linen curtain, while Freydis disappears behind another. Modesty here is relative. Everyone sees everyone eventually, and somehow that's fine. Bathing, like battle, has its rules. A big man named Ulfra waves you in with a grin. Hope you brought good gossip, he says. We trade stories for soap. You chuckle, settle onto a bench, and brace for the heat. A bucket of water sloshes onto the hot stones. Hisses, and suddenly you're in a dragon's throat. Sweat beads instantly, your skin prickles, and still, it feels good. Bathing was surprisingly important to Viking life. Cleanliness meant strength, discipline, and even sex appeal. Anglo-Saxon monks griped constantly that Viking raiders stole their women because they washed more than once a season. Once a week? That was scandalously seductive. In this steamy den of half-naked truth-telling, stories flow like mead. Someone recounts a cursed fishing net. Another confesses to kissing a priest during a raid. Then someone says, loud enough to carry, "So what's this I hear about Freydis turning down a shield maiden?" The steam doesn't hide the smirks. You grin. Ask her yourself. She's right there. Freydis steps into the heat like a thunderclap, hair wet, wrapped in a towel, eyes half-lidded and wholly unimpressed. I didn't turn her down, she says. I moved on. That shuts everyone up. She drops onto the bench beside you. The steam swirls around her like a crown. You glance at her thigh, where a long scar peeks out from beneath the towel. You've never asked about it. She's never offered. Now she catches you looking. Boar tusk, she says. First kill. I slipped. You nod. How old? 3. The room quiets. You soak, sweat, breathe, and let the steam pull stories from your pores. Here's your quirky fact. Bathhouses doubled as gossip hubs, matchmaking sites, and sometimes unofficial courts. Deals were made in the steam, affairs were discovered, alliances were sealed, and occasionally lovers slipped into the dark corner by the barrels and made other kinds of agreements. Remember last year? Ulf mutters, eyes twinkling, when Brynjar and that merchant's wife got caught behind the salt pile. Groans, chuckles, someone fate gags. Better than the time Aslaug gave birth during a soak, says another voice. Mid-champ, didn't miss a beat. You lean close to Freydis. Ever kissed anyone in a bathhouse? She eyes you sideways, once, with someone who couldn't grow a beard. You raise a brow. Better than me. She grins. Different. Not better. That's enough. Then the talk shifts. Someone asks, when's your first? You blink. Our what? Child, Ulfri says. You and Freydis. Word is, you're serious. Freydis laughs. We're serious about surviving winter. You'll be good parents, someone says, almost too casually. Stubborn, loud, perfect. You don't answer. Neither does she. You just breathe. Afterward, you step outside, wrapped in wool, still sweating. The air hits you like a slap from a frozen fish. You don't care. You feel new. Freydis walks beside you, hair dripping, face flushed. You ever think about it? She asks. Kids? Sometimes, you admit. Looks ahead. I think I'd be terrible at lullabies. You smile. You'd sing them in battle chant. She doesn't laugh. She's thinking. Finally, she says, I'd want them to have a choice. More than we got. You nod. Then we give it to them. Historians still argue about how Viking society treated children born out of wedlock. Some say they were ignored or discarded. Others argue it depended on who the parents were. Bloodlines mattered. But so did power. And love, well, that was extra. You reach your home just as snow begins to fall again. Soft, light, almost embarrassed to be here this late in the season. You stop at the threshold. She turns. You kiss her. Steam still clings to your skin. Her lips are warm. No one's watching. No one needs to. This isn't performance, or strategy, or survival. It's just two bodies that know each other now. Two people with scars and secrets and heat between them that no bathhouse could ever touch. You step inside. Behind you, the snow keeps falling, quietly. The sagas don't always tell the whole story. They sing of men with arms like tree trunks, of women who summon thunder with one look, of gods who can't keep their pants or animal forms on. But the stories often skip the quieter truths, the ones whispered, not shouted, the ones that don't end in blood, but in something far more dangerous, understanding. That's what happens the night you find the old scroll under Freydis's cot. It's wrapped in oilcloth, dry but brittle. You unfold it carefully, expecting spells or a battle hymn. But it's a poem, written in soft ink, elegant script, delicate, where everything else in this world is made to break. You don't recognize the runes. Freydis sees you reading and freezes. That's not for anyone else, she says. You stop. Whose is it? She sits, pulls her knees up and says, my mother's. She wrote it for someone. You wait. She doesn't say, for my father, she says, for someone, and you understand. In Viking society, same-sex love didn't vanish, but it also didn't thrive in the open. Among men, it was tolerated, conditionally. A warrior could love another man, privately, but to be seen as the passive one invited mockery. Or worse, it wasn't about love, it was about roles. For women, the records are quieter, but they're there. The poems, the grave goods, the way sagas skip over the names of companions buried side by side. Freydis leans her head against the wall. My mother had a lover, a woman. They were caught. Your stomach turns. Wasn't killed, she adds quickly, but she was married off, forced away. Her heart never came back. You ask, and your father? He was kind, but he was a bandage, not a choice. We sit beside her. And you? I've chosen, she says, twice now. We swallow. And are you happy with this choice? She doesn't look at you, but she says, I'm still here, aren't I? That's the answer. Here's your quirky fringe detail. In Norse mythology, Loki, ever the chaos engine, frequently shifts between genders. Once he even becomes a mare, mates with a stallion and gives birth to an 8-legged horse. The gods don't punish him, they just shrug. Gender, fluid, love, trickier. Historians still argue whether the North actually condemned same-sex love, or simply didn't categorize it the way later Christian culture did. Some claim Viking masculinity was rigid and punishing. Others point to the fluidity in myth, fashion, and custom as proof that things weren't so black and white. Back in the present, Freydis traces the edge of the scroll. She wrote this after they were parted. Every word aches. You nod. Do you think they met again? I hope not, she says, because if they had, someone would have died for it. You sit in silence for a while. Then, quietly, you ask, are you afraid that you'll lose me the same way she lost her? Freydis shakes her head. No, but I'm afraid of forgetting who I was before I loved you. That lands harder than any sword swing. Because you've seen it, in your mother, in your neighbors, in every woman who gave up pieces of herself for peace, for safety, for the illusion of belonging. You take her hand. Then don't forget, you say. And don't ask me to make you. She breathes out, shaky, then leans against you. And for later that night, as the fire burns low, you recite part of it aloud. The verse speaks of rivers, divided, of longing that tastes like salt, of hands that touched once, and were never allowed to again. Freydis says, it's the saddest thing I've ever loved. You whisper, not everything we love has to break. She closes her eyes. Quieter than breath, she says. Let's make that true. Spring finally arrives like a drunk guest, loud, sloppy, full of surprises. The snow's gone, replaced by mud that sucks at your boots like it wants to steal your soul. Birds return with attitude. So do the flies. The village hums with movement, planting, building, mending things broken by winter, or by people. And, because it's spring, people start whispering again. About babies, about fertility, about how to prevent it. You and Freydis are chopping wood, when Thorstein walks up with a satchel of herbs and the grin of a man who knows way too much. You two might want these, he says, dropping a bundle at your feet. Freydis raises an eyebrow. Poison? And contraception, he smirks. You stare at the dried leaves and roots. Is that parsley, among other things? Or she squints. What else? Juniper, some red clover, a little seaweed. Oh, and moss. Freydis pauses. Moths? He grins. Don't ask where it goes. Here's your historical fact. Viking women had knowledge of birth control, rudimentary but real. They used herbs like tansy, wild carrot, and even dried animal dung as early contraceptives. Some were brewed into teas, others were stuffed in, well, you can imagine. It wasn't foolproof, but it was a start. After Thorstein leaves, and after you both laugh until your ribs hurt, Freydis picks up the moss and turns it over like it might insult her. "Not putting this anywhere," she mutters. You grin. Noted. Still, the idea lingers. The possibility of not having children, of choosing not to be a mother just because that's what's expected. It's a bold thought, maybe even dangerous. You bring it up again that night, over soup. You want them, you ask? Children? Freydis sips, wipes her mouth, then shrugs. I don't know, she says. I want choices. I want to be ready. I want to feel like it's my decision, not just the next step in someone else's plan. You nod. She looks at you, really looks, then says, but if we did, you'd make a good father. You smile. You'd make a terrifying mother. Exactly, she grins. No one would mess with our kid. Here's your quirky fact. Some Viking communities believed in fate being tied to the number of children you had. A barren couple might bury a carved figurine of Freyr, the fertility god, in their fields. Or, if desperate, they'd sleep with the statue nearby. No word on how intimate that got. Some even wore carved amulets shaped like phalluses or vulvas, believing it would channel the power of birth. Others relied on more creative methods. Ritual chants, special meals, charms hung over the bed. You and Freydis, you decide to wait. You build a small chest and line it with rabbit fur. Inside you place the carved wooden horse she gave you, the driftwood poem, and a small pouch of herbs, just in case. A strange kind of love box. Later that week, you hear a story from the trader's wife. A woman in Birka once fed her lover a potion made from eel blood and ground berries to ensure he wouldn't get her pregnant. He didn't. But he also fainted during a thunderstorm and claimed he saw Odin. So, results may vary. Historians still argue whether Viking contraception was common or niche. Some sagas ignore it entirely, others hint at it in side notes and footnotes, like a secret too impolite to discuss. But it existed, like choice, like doubt, like love that doesn't always want to reproduce itself. One evening you and Freydis lie in the grass outside the village, watching stars come out like shy fireflies. She says, "Would you still want me if I said never?" You don't ask what she means, you know. "Yeah," you say. "Even if it disappointed your parents." "They're not the ones I sleep beside." She leans her head on your chest. "Even if it makes people whisper." You smile. Let them choke on it. She laughs, quietly. Then she says, "I think that's what I love about us. We chose this." You don't reply. You just hold her tighter, as the sky spins slowly above you. No plan, no rush, just now. The word divorce isn't one you hear often in Viking villages, but when you do, it lands like a dropped axe, sharp, sudden, and usually followed by someone crying into a mug of barley beer. It happens during Thing Week, when folks from neighboring settlements gather to air grievances, settle disputes, and get very drunk. There's trading, wrestling, and occasionally someone yelling, "You slept with my cousin," followed by a chase through a goat pen. This time, the drama stars Inga and Leif. Married 3 winters, no children, lots of shouting. Trady hears about it first. You come home to find her sharpening 2 knives and muttering, "She better get the sheep." In Viking society, divorce wasn't a failure, it was a tool. A clean cut when things went wrong. Both men and women could initiate it, though with different rules. For a woman, it often meant standing before witnesses and declaring, "I divorce you," 3 times at the threshold of their shared home. That's it. No scrolls, no trials, no weeping lawyers. Inga does it right. She waits until everyone's gathered at the feast table, then she stands up, plants her fists on her hips and yells across the table, "Leif, I'm done being your second thought, and your third wife." He blinks. "We're out of fish." "Your response?" she snaps. She marches to their hut, flings his cloak out the door, and calls 2 neighbors to witness. "I divorce you. I divorce you. I divorce you." That's it. Marriage over. The crowd reacts with equal parts awe and cheers. Freydis pumps her fists like Inga just won a wrestling match. Later you sit around the fire, talking about it. Freydis sharpens her blade in slow, deliberate strokes. "Good for her," she says. You ask, "You think we'd know when to end it? if it ever came to that. She doesn't look up. You afraid? Sweating. Of what then? Of not knowing when it's broken. She finally looks at you. We'd feel it, and we'd say it. That's the deal. You nod. You believe her. Quirky detail for you. If a Viking woman wanted to leave her husband and take her dowry back, she had to prove why. Some carved runes into furniture detailing his insults. Others called on family to testify. There's even a saga where a woman dumped her husband for wasting too much silver on stupid hats. Sometimes the reasons were petty, sometimes deadly serious. Historians still argue how often divorce actually happened. The sagas suggest it wasn't rare, but those were stories, not census records. Still, the fact that women could own property, initiate divorce, and remarry freely was radical by medieval standards. That night, you and Freydis lie back to back like usual, but her hand finds yours under the fur. I wouldn't leave, she says, unless you made me. You squeeze gently. Same. She laughs into the dark. I'd win the property, though. No argument here. Later, you overhear Inga telling someone, I'd rather be cold and free than warm and bored. She's already flirting with a blacksmith's apprentice. Leif? He's sleeping in a grain shed and talking to a goat. No one's worried. Still, it makes you think. You sit by the water one morning, carving nothing in particular, and wonder, what is the line? Where does love end and endurance begin? Freydis finds you there. You brooding. Just about us? She sits beside you, quiet for a while. Then she says, we're not perfect, but I've never wanted perfect. You hand her the carving. A wolf curled in on itself, guarding something unseen. You made that for me. No, you say. I made it about you. She slips it into her belt. Then I guess you're stuck with me, she says. And you smile, because you've never been more glad to be stuck in your life. You wake to shouting and the distant sound of clashing metal. It's not war, it's celebration. The wedding season has officially begun, and your village is the first stop on what will become a multi-week blur of ceremonies, feasts, awkward dances, and competitive drinking. You barely have time to rub the sleep from your eyes before someone's already knocking on your door asking if you have extra antlers. Apparently they're centerpieces now. But this wedding isn't yours, it's Thorstein's. Somehow, miraculously, he convinced the baker's daughter to marry him. She's bright, quick-witted, and terrifying with a rolling pin. You suspect she sees Thorstein as a long-term carpentry project, not a finished husband. Still, there's joy in the air, and that's rare. Freydis doesn't love weddings. Too much noise, too many expectations. Still, she braids her hair and sharpens her best knife, because nothing says romance like being ready for a brawl. At the feast, someone sings about love and mead, someone else throws up under the longhouse table, and then come the honeymoon games. Thorstein is blindfolded and spun around. He's meant to find his new bride by touch alone, with a crowd of women in line to confuse him. He gropes 3 wrong arms and 1 very offended uncle before getting it right. Everyone cheers. You and Freydis, you watch from a distance. She leans in. You ever wish we had a wedding like this? You shrug. I like what we had. It was ours. She smirks. Yeah. Less vomiting. Here's your historical fact. Viking weddings were rarely simple affairs. They involved multiple days of rituals, from hand fastings to symbolic sword exchanges. The groom sometimes broke into the bride's ancestral home and abducted her as a rite of passage. Often, the couple was expected to consummate the marriage in a communal space, with witnesses nearby to verify. Yeah, romantic. Later, as the newlyweds disappear into a small, pine-scented hut, Freydis grabs your hand and pulls you outside. Come on, she says, let's have our honeymoon. Late. You follow her into the forest, torches behind you fading. The moon's high, the air thick with pine and possibility. She leads you to a small clearing where the ground is soft with moss and fireflies flicker like lazy stars. "This is where I used to sneak off," she says, "when I needed to scream or think." "And now?" you ask. She takes your hand. "Now, I want to share it. No one watches, no one dares." You sit together under the trees, shoulders touching, hearts not racing anymore, but steady, deep, like the kind of love that doesn't need to shout. She leans into you. You pull off your boots and stretch your legs like you own the forest. "You smell like roasted lamb," she murmurs. "You smell like pine sap and secrets." He grins. "But that's more accurate." Quirky detail. Some Viking honeymoons weren't journeys, but rituals of transformation. For 9 nights the groom gave the bride gifts, each symbolic: a comb, a cup, a blade. On the 9th night she gave him something back, often a story, sometimes a secret, sometimes a name. You didn't get 9 nights, you got a blur of frost and fear and fire. But here, under the trees, you ask her anyway. "Would you have given me your name?" She nods slowly. Not at first, but now. She takes your hand, places it on her chest. "Now I'd carve it into bone." You shiver. From cold. The next morning, a bear is spotted near the village. Naturally, someone suggests the newlyweds chase it away as a test of bravery. Freydis volunteers. You follow, sword ready, wondering what kind of wedding tradition this is. The bear turns out to be old, grumpy, and missing half a paw. It limps off after one shout from Freydis. The crowd laughs. Someone calls it an omen. Thorstein says, "Best honeymoon ever." Back home, Freydis drops onto the bed with a sigh. "I don't want a bigger house," she says, "or more sheep, or jewelry." He raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" She looks at you. "I want this. You, me, time, and a little quiet." You reach over, brush a pine needle from her hair. "Then, that's what we fight for." And you do. Every day. Even when the sky throws snow in your face, even when the goats eat your boots, even when people say, love is just an arrangement. Because maybe that's true. But yours? Yours was forged in fire and sharpened on silence, and no bear or wedding feast can undo it. The wind changes. It's subtle at first, just a colder breath at night, a howl that doesn't quite match the trees. Even the dogs notice, growling at nothing, hackles up. Freydis shrugs it off at first, but you feel it too. Something other has arrived. It starts with the widow. She's older, sharp-eyed, always smells like boiled roots and fire ash. People say her husband died in the storm 3 winters ago, crushed beneath a tree. Except, she still sets a place for him every night. And not just the plate. She talks to him. Most ignore it. Old grief, strange habits. But then her firewood starts showing up stacked overnight. Her door swings shut on its own, and one morning she walks into the village square with a gash on her neck and says calmly, "He's back." You try to dismiss it. You and Freydis don't do ghost stories, you fight real battles. But that night, you hear something at your door. A knock. Too soft to be human, too rhythmic to be wind. Freydis grips your arm. "Huh, that's not an animal." You both rise, barefooted and silent. The fire crackles low. You open the door slowly. Nothing, just fog. But there, pressed into the snow, a bare footprint. You and Freydis exchange a look. Then you close the door, bar it, and stoke the fire higher than necessary. In Viking lore, the line between life and death was thin. The draga, the restless dead, weren't just spirits. They had form. They guarded treasure, haunted lovers, and sometimes came back to finish unfinished business. And in some stories, they were drawn to passion, to jealousy, to unfinished love. Freydis says it aloud 2 nights later. It's the widow's husband. He won't let go. Do you murmur, "Would you haunt me?" Or she thinks about it. Only if you remarried someone annoying. Define annoying. Someone who puts honey in everything and calls it healing. Fear. That night, you find a message scratched into your woodpile. She's mine. Freydis doesn't flinch. She sharpens her spear. The village whispers. Someone suggests a siege ritual, a calling of spirits, or a banishing, depending on who you ask. You volunteer to help, not because you believe it'll work, but because Freydis wants to see it. The Volva arrives cloaked in raven feathers, humming low. Her face is painted with ash and she walks barefoot through frost like it's sand. The ritual is simple. Fire, chants, blood. She slices your palm gently and lets it drip into a bowl. Freydis watches, jaw tight. The Volva mutters names you don't recognize, one of which sounds disturbingly like yours. Then the wind stops. Dead still, a breathless moment. And then the fire bends sideways, not dies, bends. The Volva says, he is here, but he does not want her. He wants to finish something. People start muttering. Someone cries. You say, what does he want? The Volva stares through you. To feel her again. One more night. That's when the widow steps forward. I loved him, she says, but he doesn't belong here anymore. And she does something no one expects. She sings. A lullaby. Old, ragged, it wavers like smoke. The wind returns. The fire straightens. A sudden warmth spreads through the clearing. And just like that, it's over. No scream, no blast, just a settling, like a weight dropped gently to the bottom of the fjord. Quirky fact, in some Norse regions, people believed a dead lover could return in dreams. If they did, you were supposed to give them something, a token, a promise, even a piece of clothing, to keep them from coming again. Others believed you had to talk to the dead, or they'd never stop knocking. Freydis and you walk home in silence. She says, if I die first, don't bury me near anyone I disliked. Ugh. And if I come back, it's only to mess with you. Fair. You lie together that night closer than usual. You think of love that lingers too long, of hands that hold even after death, of jealousy powerful enough to shake the veil between worlds. Then Freydis whispers, you're not allowed to haunt me unless you help with the laundry. And just like that, the fear breaks. You fall asleep to her breath against your neck. And in the morning, footprints, no whispers, just silence, the good kind. The baby arrives before anyone's ready. Not yours, God's, no. That would have been too clean a story. No, it's the blacksmith's youngest sister. Her water breaks in the middle of a fishing trip. She gets hauled back in a wheelbarrow while screaming insults no one knew she knew. The village midwife, whose hands are the size of dinner plates, takes over like a general in battle. You and Freydis are chopping wood when the news hits. Someone runs past shouting, it's crowning, and Freydis nearly drops the axe on her foot. Later the cries fill the air, first the mother's, then the child's, then the mother again, because apparently someone dropped the broth. Freydis watches it all from a distance. You both do. It's impossible not to be drawn to that moment. The brutal beauty of birth, messy and honest, and nothing like the songs say. That night she sits on the edge of your bed, unusually quiet. I saw her, she says, the baby, red and loud, alive. You will. And I thought, what if that had been me? What if I was born to a different life? You know what she means. She doesn't just mean parenthood. She means beginnings, destiny, paths not chosen. So you ask her, what were you like as a child. She snorts. Dirty, fast, had a sling and could hit birds out of the sky by 5. Friend. She shrugs. Not really. Just trees, rocks, one goat. I named him Stab. You named a goat Stab? Pit people. Of course. Here's your historical fact. Viking children were raised to be useful, not just adored. By age 3, they were mimicking chores. By 7, handling knives. Discipline was sharp, but affection existed. Braided into lullabies, carved into wooden toys, whispered over sleeping heads. Some toys have been found in graves. Miniature swords, horses, dolls with bead eyes. Proof that even in a culture of warriors, gentleness had a place. Freydis lies back beside you and stares at the beams overhead. I didn't cry much, she says. My mother said I came into the world already angry. You reach for her hand. She lets you hold it. I used to dream about running away, she adds, not to somewhere better, just away. You nod. And now? She turns her head to face you. Now I know what I was running toward. You. It's not a declaration, it's a confession, and it warms something deep in your chest. Quirky tidbit? There's a lullaby carved into the margins of a saga, barely legible. It's addressed to a child of thunder, promising that the wolves outside the door can't touch them because mother's knife is sharp and father's eyes see ghosts. It's half comfort, half warning. The next day, the blacksmith's sister names the baby Brynja, meaning armor. Everyone applauds. Freydis brings them soup. She returns with tear streaks on her face. I didn't cry when I fought raiders, she says, blinking fast. But that little thing wrapped her hand around my finger and... You hold her. No words, just arms around her, tight enough to remind her that whatever she's feeling is allowed. That night, she says, I still don't know if I want children. You say, you don't have to decide today. She nods, but I'd like to imagine it. So you do. If you talk about what kind of parents you'd be, you decide Freydis would teach axe throwing by age 6, and you'd be the one explaining why you can't put moss in your siblings' shoes just because they cried first. You laugh until your ribs hurt, and somewhere in that laughter is healing. Not a decision, which is possibility, because love, real love, doesn't always demand answers. Sometimes it just needs space to grow, like a child, or a future. The rains come hard. Not the polite spring kind, but the kind that drowns seeds, tears roofs and turns roads into ankle-deep soup. For days the sky won't shut up. It growls, weeps, spits on everything. You wake to leaks, soggy cloaks, and the constant smell of wet dog, even though you don't own a dog. You and Freydis hunker down. This isn't the romantic curl up under furs and giggle kind of storm. It's long, miserable, and personal. You patch holes in the roof. She curses at the mud. The world is damp and dark, and you both start snapping at each other over nothing. She uses your knife without asking. You leave the firewood damp. She stabs bread too hard. You salt the stew wrong. One night she tosses a boot at you. You toss it back. The tension gets louder than the rain. Still, you don't leave. Because deep down you both know this is legacy weather. This is when it matters. Here's your historical fact. Viking love wasn't just forged in fire. It was tempered in boredom, hardship, and shared responsibility. A good match wasn't someone who thrilled you. It was someone who stuck through the flood. Someone who helped you dig out when the fields turned to swamp. Brady throws open the longhouse door one morning and yells into the storm, "Is that all you've got?" You watch her, drenched and fearless, and think, I love her even when she smells like mold and war. Later, she finds you drying her socks by the fire. I yelled at a cloud, she says. I noticed. I think I scared you. You nod solemnly. I'm sure Thor heard you. Quirky fringe facts. Some Viking households kept small carved charms by their doors, little figures with exaggerated parts, to protect against storms and encourage fertility. Wither, they believed, was personal. If your roof leaked, you'd done something to offend a god, or forgotten to feed your ancestors. You find an old carved amulet in your storage bin. Freydis holds it up. Looks like a thunder god with performance anxiety. You string it by the door anyway. One night, when the rain's finally just drizzling, Freydis pulls out the wooden box you made, the one holding your shared tokens. She adds something, a bundle of hair wrapped in red thread. From my braid, she says, for luck. You add something too, a small piece of broken comb from your mother's old kit. Because this life is messy, you say, and combs break. She smiles, and we keep the pieces. Historians still argue whether Viking intimacy was more transactional or emotional. Marriage was about alliances, yes, but the sagas are filled with longing, with grief, with people torn apart not by war, but by misunderstanding. The deepest wounds didn't always come from blades. You and Freydis ride out the storm like seasoned warriors. Not perfectly, but together. When the sun finally cracks the sky open, you both step outside like you've survived a siege. The ground is soft, the air is warm, flowers are daring to exist again. Freydis tilts her face to the sun. You say, "You smell like wet moss and victory." She replies, "You look like a drowned goat, and I still want to kiss you." So you kiss, not out of lust, not out of ritual, just gratitude. You survived another season, another storm, another chance to keep choosing each other. Later, while hanging soaked clothes on the line, she says, "You know what I think?" You glance over, dangerous words. "I think this," she gestures at the puddles, the patched walls, the smoke-stained ceiling, "is the love we'll be remembered for." Smile, and hope she's right. Because this is the stuff sagas are made of. You're older now. Not old exactly, but your knees remind you when it rains, and your sword arm's lost a little of its bite. Freydis has more silver in her braid than gold, but she still sharpens her knife like she means it. And you? You've stopped pretending you can fix the roof in one go. The longhouse is quiet these days. Not silent, just slower. You wake before dawn, not because of chores, but out of habit. Freydis sleeps deeper now. She used to stir at every sound. Now she trusts the walls, the world, you. The kids in the village call her Auntie Axe. They don't know the half of it. Some nights you both sit by the hearth and say nothing, not out of tension, just peace. You've talked through all the hard things. You've yelled, made up, survived 4 floods, 2 fires, and 1 very rude swan. What's left to say? Plenty. But now it's all in the pauses. Here's your historical fact. Viking elders were respected, not discarded. Wisdom wasn't just tolerated, it was sought. The old ones passed down not just knowledge, but reputation. Who you had loved, what you had built, who still told your stories. And your name? It lived longer than your bones. Freydis has begun teaching the younger girls how to braid rope. You catch her telling them that love isn't about candlelight. It's about staying through storms and sharing stew when the meat runs thin. One asks if she ever wanted to be someone else. She says, "No, but I needed to become who I am." And that, you realize, is the whole story. Quirky tidbit. Some Viking graves include 2 skeletons, buried side by side, holding hands. Some historians say it's symbolic. Others say it's practical. A few whisper it's romantic. You and Freydis have chosen your spot, by the cliff, overlooking the fjord. You marked the earth years ago with a shared stone, carved with 2 runes, hers for fire, yours for home. One day, Someone will bury you there. But not today. Today you both sit on the bench outside the longhouse, watching the gulls fight over a fish head. The air smells like pine and salt. The village is noisy. Children shrieking. Someone yelling about burned porridge. Goats doing goat things. She leans against your shoulder. You say, "Remember when you said you didn't want any of this?" She grunts. "I also said I didn't want to marry a man who couldn't cook. And yet, you've gotten better." It's true. Your life hasn't been epic in the saga sense. You never ruled a kingdom. You never discovered a new land. You didn't die in battle, sword in hand, screaming Odin's name. You lived. Loved. You stayed. And Freydis? She's still here. You rest your hand over hers. The fingers are stiffer now, but the grip is the same. You don't need gods to bless this. You already did. Together. The fire is low now. The longhouse glows with fading warmth. Outside the wind has softened. The world exhales. You and Freydis sleep soundly, curled in the same bed where you once argued, laughed, kissed, and survived winters that bit harder than wolves. The walls creak like old joints. The roof leaks in only one spot now, a small drip that lands in a wooden bowl with a familiar rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. The past doesn't haunt you. It sings, low and steady, the sound of wood being split, of fur rustling, of breath shared in the dark. You remember the first time you saw her, the way her eyes said, "Try me," before her mouth did. You remember your first lie, your first truth, the first time you weren't afraid to sleep beside someone and stay. You remember the long walks, the cold mornings, the one night you both thought a ghost was trying to kill you, but it turned out to be a goat trapped in a bucket. All of it, yours. You're not legend, you're legacy. And maybe that's better. Somewhere, a raven calls once and takes off into the grey sky. Somewhere, your story is already being told by someone else who only knows the shape of your names. Somewhere, maybe far, maybe very close, another hand clasps another under wool and whispers, "I choose you, still." Because that's all love really is, in the end. Choosing, over and over. Even when the roof leaks, even when the soup burns, even when the snow bites. Especially then. The story ends here. Close your eyes. Drift deep. Sweet dreams.